All right, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Chris, and today I have a very special guest coming on today to talk some Flyers and some hockey with me. Jordan Hall, the pretty much the main Flyers writer here from NBC Sports Philadelphia. Jordan, how are you doing? Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Chris, I appreciate you having me on. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. So, pretty much, kind of just start off here. Me and Jordan today, we're going to be talking about the proposed divisions with the NHL. Obviously, the league hasn't started yet, and there's been a bunch of stuff about when they'll start with the things with all the players and how much money they'll be taking out of the contracts and that whole mess. So it seems like it was rumored that they were pretty much supposed to be getting it done before January, or excuse me, before the end of the month for January 1st to start on January 1st. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. It's tomorrow is Thanksgiving, the 26th. So it's it looks like it's going to be a little bit pushed back, maybe the second or third week of January, maybe February. But there have been some proposed divisions. As for those divisions in general, and just for the Flyers, a couple things that kind of catch my eye, Jordan, I know, and I'm sure with you as well. Obviously, the whole Canadian division, that's been one thing that's been talked about a lot with all of the Canadian teams in the one division. So that would be still seven in that division. Kind of just going off that, Jordan, what are your thoughts on that Canadian division there?
Yeah, obviously, first and foremost, I think it makes sense, obviously, with the borders, and obviously it would be really difficult to not have an all-Canadian division given the uncertainty of the COVID pandemic and obviously the different cases in the United States, Canada. So it makes a lot of sense. Some really good teams, some good teams. I think it would be cool, obviously, because I know how passionate the market is up in Canada for hockey. So to see an all-Canadian division, I think, would be unique and different, and I think fans up there certainly would embrace it. As far as teams, I think a lot of firepower. I think you'll see a lot of offense with the Jets and the Oilers and the Leafs, even the Flames. Obviously, the Canucks are pretty young enough, up-and-coming team. Canadians make the playoffs, and then the Senators rebuilding. So I think a lot of firepower, a lot of offense, and I think a lot of intrigue in that possible division.
Yeah, I completely agree. I kind of feel like, really, I think the best team, kind of just looking at it right now, is probably Toronto. Obviously, they've probably been one of the best teams out of all the Canadian ones in recent years, making the playoffs. And also just with the way I think that they've had their offseason so far, acquiring guys like former Flyer Wayne Simmons, Zach Bogosian, Joe Thornton, TJ Brody. It looks like the Leafs are really starting to get pretty good there, looking to add some physical and toughness to their team. But I feel like overall, I think it'll be a good division. I think literally it's hockey night in Canada every night, so why would we complain? But
Yeah.
kind of just going off of that, the USA Division 1, that's pretty much what this is looking to be named as of now. This is the east side. So pretty much you have Boston, Buffalo, Carolina, New Jersey, the Rangers, Islanders, Capitals, and our very own Flyers. So a little bit different because obviously no Flyers Penguins. It's as pretty much this is all in division play with the 60 games being rumored, and also all in division play with the Canadian division in play. So pretty much no Flyers Penguins is obviously a little weird. It's something that pretty much everybody looks forward to every year. But yeah, I think this might be the first time since I believe 2011-12 that the Flyers will be playing like a team like the Rangers more than 4 times. I believe that year they played them 6, including the Winter Classic. But just kind of going off that, Jordan, what are your thoughts on that division there?
Yeah, very weird to not see the Penguins in the same category with the Flyers, obviously. Same
Yeah.
division. That would certainly be odd if that does, in fact, be the case with the Flyers division. So, yeah, that would certainly be weird. But obviously, you see the addition of the Bruins. That would certainly not help the Flyers' chances in terms of a pretty good Bruins team. That was the best team in the league last year. And we all know the names they have on that top line and
Right.
who they have in net. So that will be difficult. But I did look it up. The Flyers actually played pretty well against all those teams in that proposed division last year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the record off the top of my head, but for the most part, they were very good against the Rangers, very good against the Capitals. The
Mm-hmm.
one team, obviously, that we know they had trouble with was the Islanders, the team that ended their season. But pretty good against the Devils, very good against the
Yeah.
Hurricanes. They were really good against the Bruins, and they went 2-0-0 against the Sabres. So I found it interesting that they for the most part, played very well against these teams.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest thing I noticed was obviously the addition of the Bruins. and then obviously not seeing the Penguins. That would probably be the biggest two things that stick
Yeah.
out to me. But I don't think the Flyers, no matter what division they're in going into next season, whether it's this realigned division or if it's their normal Metropolitan Division, time will tell. But I don't think they should be lacking confidence. I think they should like who they have in place. And I think we're quick to forget that they were just a game away from the Eastern Conference Finals. So I think they should not lack confidence.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I feel like the Flyers are. I think they're still a playoff team, regardless of the loss of Matt Niskanen. They're obviously their big second. Their number 2 defenseman, I should say. But just kind of going off what you said with those teams there. I know off the top of my head they only had one loss to Carolina and the Capitals. So that's 2. Remember the year before in 18-19, they lost all 8 games played against both those teams. They went 0-4 against both. So that was a huge turnaround as well. And as you said, I believe against Boston they went 2-1.
Yep.
They had the 2 shootout wins, the one where Marchand missed the puck, and then the last one, the one that they lost, was obviously the last game of the regular season they had. So I feel like the Flyers will do pretty well in that division. I feel like the top 3 teams right now, in my opinion, would probably be Boston, Carolina, and the Flyers. I think the Rangers could be up there. I still think the Capitals could be up there as well. It's not going to be an easy division by any standards. I honestly think Buffalo could push for a playoff spot with the signing of Taylor Hall and just some of the guys that they've signed. But overall, I think it'll be a pretty solid division. And obviously the pesky Islanders, who I am still annoyed about over the playoffs. But that's a different story for a different day. But the USA Division 2 here, kind of a mix of some old NHL here, like from early 2010s with Columbus and Detroit being in the same division. But you have Chicago, Columbus, Detroit, Florida, Nashville, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and Tampa Bay, the 2 past Stanley Cup winners in the same division. So, Jordan, what are your thoughts on the USA Division 2 here?
Sure. And real quick, I just found that stat that I was looking for. The Flyers went 15-4-3 against that reported new division that they would be in. So played pretty well against those teams, and I think Flyers fans should take something from that. But as for this USA2 division, again, another fun grouping in my opinion.
Yeah.
You really have some big names in there with the Penguins, obviously, with the Crosbys and Malkins. You have the Lightning coming off the Stanley Cup championship. We all know who they have. You had the Blackhawks with Patrick Kane and those names. So I think there's a lot of excitement there. And then let's not forget the Blues, who before the Lightning took the Stanley Cup this year, they were the defending champs with obviously a young netminder and Jordan Binnington. Preds have been around. They've been a team that's been in the playoffs. A lot of history there to them recently. And then Florida Panthers with Joel Quenneville, a young team that's kind of up and coming, that can really score. I think they were a top 6 or 7 goal scoring team last year. Mm-hmm. And then we know what the Blue Jackets have. Flyers fans are pretty familiar there. So I think another fun group of teams that would be intriguing. I think I'm probably going to say the same words about all these divisions, but it's something different and unique. It reminds me kind of the 2014 tournament. It was just different. So there was intrigue there with something different than what we've seen in the past. And I think we're seeing a lot of that here. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's a lot of rebuilding teams. Obviously, Chicago, Detroit. Yep. You could maybe argue Columbus. Florida, they've been a team that's struggled, but they obviously have some high-end talent guys like if they do re-sign Hoffman. They also have obviously Barkov, Huberdeau, Sergei Bobrovsky, who I personally think will have a rebound season. But overall, I think it's a very good division. I think there's some teams that really could shine. Obviously, as I said, with the rebuilding teams, but overall, I think it's a good division. And when I saw this, and that's why I brought up the old, I shouldn't even really say old, it's really in this decade, maybe like 2008 or so. But remember, for the longest time, I remember like one of my favorite players of all time is Pavel Datsyuk. And me watching his highlights is just incredible. If you could look it up on YouTube, there's like a 5-part that's like literally like an hour long. It's like 5 hours long, just all Pavel Datsyuk highlights. They're split up into like 5 videos. It's incredible. But I feel like a lot of games where they talk about them having big rivalry games against Columbus, and obviously that kind of faded out with the teams. Obviously the Red Wings making the playoffs for 25 straight years and then missing these past couple of years and now rebuilding. And Columbus really having only a handful of good teams. They've actually only had 2 in 2014 and 2019 was really when they had their 2 best teams ever, really in their franchise history. So it is a little bit weird, but moving on, USA Division 3. This is a little bit of a weaker division. I'd say probably
Yeah.
the weakest is most likely the Canadian division out of all of these. But the Division 3 here of Anaheim, Arizona, Colorado, Dallas, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and then Minnesota and San Jose. So, Jordan, what are your thoughts on this division here?
I agree with you, Chris. I think this is the weakest of the four if you had to pick one. Just given some of the teams, like the Ducks, Coyotes, Kings, Sharks, they're kind of going through phases where they're looking to rebuild and kind of get back into contention. Maybe not as much as the Coyotes, but definitely there's other three teams. Even the Wild, I know, I think they're kind of in a weird state. I don't know if they're definitely a team that's totally out of it, but I don't think they're definitely a team that's going for it.
Yeah,
We know what the Golden Knights are. Yeah, and then I think the element of fun there is obviously the Avalanche and Stars, two teams that saw each other in the playoffs last year. The Stars had that kind of Cinderella type run to the Cup, so that would be fun. And Avalanche look really good. They look like they're built now and also for the future. They remind me a little of the Flyers, just given they have some nice youth and some big names. So, yeah, if I had to pick one division that was the weakest, I think it would be this one.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I feel like when I kind of looked at these, kind of skimmed over them, I was thinking more the Canadian division was probably the weakest. I look at it now, I'm like, I think this Division 3 looks a little weaker just with some of the teams. I mean, obviously some of them are rebuilding, obviously Anaheim, Minnesota. San Jose could be one of those teams that I look at is like a lot of people don't necessarily think that they'll make the playoffs. I personally think they could. I think they still have a lot of talent down over there. I think it was just a really off season, to be honest with you. But I mean, obviously, we all know the situation with Arizona and with the draft and everything. They literally just don't have money, which is like the biggest problem. But I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of star power with some of these teams. Obviously, the Avs. I think Vegas is obviously a very good team. They've been a very good team since they came in the league. But kind of just moving on to let's just talk about the Flyers here. So we've broken down the divisions, the pretty much the key opponents. So again, just wanted to reiterate too that it is all in division play for you listening. So all in division play is going to be tough. I don't really think. I mean, I'm not really too sure how many games they would actually play against these teams. If it's an even amount for all teams or what. Obviously, we don't even know what the scheduling and how many games it will be. But I think it's going to be a little weird seeing some of these teams again and again and again. And one thing they've also talked about, too, is that you would play these teams. So you'd have in-division play until the end of the second round of the playoffs. So that first time you're playing a different team in your different division is going to be the conference finals. So that's going to be a little weird, too, and it's going to add, I guess, more of a rivalry to it. I feel like for, that starting round there because it's going to be, we face this team a lot in the playoffs, or a lot in the regular season, and now we've faced them in the playoffs. But kind of just moving on to the Flyers here. Lineups, right? The starting lineup, the defensive pairs. Who are some guys that you think could be like the key parts of the lineup? Are there any guys you think that could play this year? Rookies, guys like Tanner Legzinski, maybe a possible Nolan Patrick return, a fully healthy Oscar Lindblom. Anything like that, Jordan? Anything for you that maybe stands out?
Sure. I think Nolan Patrick and Oscar Lindblom are just two major names that I don't want to put pressure on and say they can make or break the season, but certainly they can make or break their depth.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that was what the Flyers were thinking internally during the offseason.
Right.
Obviously, this is the flat cap era, and there wasn't a ton of money to spend, and you have to really think and be cognizant of years to come and the players you need to re-sign and stay to, to retain and keep in Philadelphia. So you have to be cognizant of that. But I think a lot of it was that they feel if Nolan Patrick can come back and play and be impactful and get past his migraine disorder, and if Oscar Lindblom can come back and kind of return to form from his cancer diagnosis, that they're looking in great shape down, in the forward groups. And they really would be if all of that transpires the way they probably hope. But those are two big ifs, two major ifs. Nolan Patrick has not played in a long, long time. He missed all of last season with the migraine disorder. And then Oscar Lindblom obviously is coming off, a really scary and, inspirational fight against cancer. So those are two big ifs to just assume or hope that those two are going to come back and all will be as normal. but they could certainly, if they do, that makes the Flyers look a lot deeper at forward. No one's going to be really thinking about what they didn't do in the offseason and why this team still looks the same. Quite frankly, it would look different. It would look different because we didn't see Nolan Patrick last season, and they were missing Oscar Lindblom after the first 30 games of the season.
Right.
So those are two guys that I think really can make or break the team's depth. If they don't get those two, then all of a sudden jobs are up for grabs, and they're going to really be asking some of these younger kids to step in and take major strides like they did last year.
Yeah, so kind of going off that, Morgan Frost, right? We've seen what Frost can do at times. He's been up and down with the team. He's made some very good strides. I personally think just with the way he's played, he's had some really nice games. He had that stretch where he played the first line with Giroux and Konechny there. If Patrick and Lindblom if Patrick is not able to play, do you think that Frost can maybe make the team?
I do. I don't think he will make the team out of training camp. I don't think that will happen. I think the team will want him to start in Lehigh Valley and just play in a bigger role and prove himself there again. Unless he blows the door down in training camp and the Flyers have a clear void there. But I think ultimately it'll be a similar situation to last season where they started with Carson Turinsky and Connor Bunneman, guys that maybe don't have the upside of Morgan Frost, but they were a little more NHL ready for the roles that the Flyers were going to be asking them to play. But I certainly expect to see Morgan Frost at some point this season, just like we did last season.
Yeah, and, I 100% agree.
The biggest thing I think they're going to be looking for is to see more 200-foot qualities, more puck management from him. Chuck Fletcher said it this offseason that there's times where Morgan Frost needs to know when to fight in terms of making a play, and times when he should not fight in terms of making a play, and maybe just be a little smarter, dump the puck in and create possession and not make the flashy highlight reel play.
Right.
But there's so much upside, so much to like about him, and I think he's going to push hard for the team.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I kind of feel like the one thing that they might have to think about, though, is that if they do these divisions, if they have the shortened schedule and everything, and with the uncertainty of the AHL, makes me think if they'll do the expanded rosters again. So we might see these guys just by default, and it makes me think if they see guys like Wade Allison, Tanner Legzinski, maybe a guy like Erman Rubtsov. I'm not 100% sure. I personally think that with everything that's happening with Patrick and with just him, with the scrimmages all up in Winnipeg, him being on the ice and things like that, I personally think he will play this year. I don't know when. I think he will, and I'm not guaranteeing it. It's just my personal opinion. As for Lindblom, I think the thing is really for him and Patrick, Lindblom and Patrick, I feel like with the way that Alain Vigneault is that he's really not a holding hand kind of coach. We've seen that with many guys like James Rimslake, Shane Gostisbehere, Jake Voracek very earlier in the season. I could go on and on. I feel like AV, if he knows that he has these guys to play, and, he did it with Lindblom in the playoffs. He was supposed to play in 15 minutes, and he went over that both times in games 6 and 7. So I kind of feel like that, if AV knows he can play these guys, he's going to. And I think, he's really going to put them with the best line mates he can. And I feel like that's going to help the Flyers. I think the lineup is very stacked as of now. I think there's a lot of questions you could ask. What guys do you put where? Does James Van Riemsdyk play the fourth line again? Do they put Nicholas Aube-Kubel on the fourth line? There's so much because they have so much depth. And I feel like the center depth is huge too. They can move Giroux to center. Obviously, Patrick can play center if he plays. Hayes, Lawton. Even Michael Raffel can play center. I think there's a lot of questions there too. Who do they use at center and things like that? But I feel like it's going to be, there are going to be a lot of questions asked. That's kind of why I feel like they haven't necessarily done anything on the offensive side, because I feel like they have some aspirations that these guys are going to come back and play. So kind of just moving on defense wise, the defense is obviously there's obviously a hole. We know with Niskanen not being here, who is going to be the number 2? I personally think it's going to be Travis Sanheim if they don't address anything before they start to play. If they do, I'm not really sure who else it could be, to be honest with you. I feel like if anything, it's going to be Provorov with Sanheim. I personally think that Shane Gostisbehere needs to play if they're going to play him. And if they don't do anything right now with the defense, if the defense is right where it is right now with the players they have, I think Ghost needs to play. I personally would put him on the second unit or second pair, excuse me. I would put him with Phil Myers because I look at Ghost like this. Like, if he isn't playing, then get rid of him because he's already, 27 years old. He can still play in the NHL. And I cannot tell you how many times we've seen guys come and play for the Flyers and not necessarily play that great and then go somewhere else and be amazing. And I feel like Gostisbehere could go somewhere and do that all again. But I personally think with Ghost is that it's this. He needs to play, and if he messes up, he needs to be out there the next shift, depending on the situation. If, he has a bad game, he needs to play the next game. If he's injured, he needs to work through it and not get sent down to Lehigh Valley or something like that. He needs to rebuild the confidence because that's what I personally think the big thing is with Ghost is that the confidence with him is shot. I feel like it's been shot. I've said this many times. I know everybody's heard this on the podcast before. When I listen to the Behind the Glass, the training camp series they have, the 4 episodes, when they interviewed him, his girlfriend, and his dogs at his house, the first thing he brought up was the trade rumors from the year before. And I was like, man, like this is still with this guy, and I just have the feeling that that's what it is. That's what's bothering him. He's also been injured too, which doesn't help. But I think that's a huge thing. His confidence is shot, and to me, the only way that can go up is that if he plays. I think he's so worried and he's so real fragile out there because he realizes if he messes up, he's not going to play. So I think that's why he's, really just I don't know, he's real panicky. I feel it when he's out there. So I think the Flyers need to really turn around with him. I think if they use him in a certain way, and I feel like this is the best way they can use him. But Jordan, kind of what are your thoughts on the defense there, and obviously the situation with Ghost?
Great points with Shane Gostisbehere. I think his confidence is definitely taking a hit. He's admitted that time and multiple times. He has talked about he is at his best when he's confident because he's a puck-moving, playmaking defenseman. You have to have confidence to be able to push the envelope and do the things that he does. If you don't, then you're going to overthink and you're going to make mistakes. And now he's in a position where you're right. The leash is not as long. It used to be a lot longer because of what he had done his rookie year and then the 65-point season. He was one of the guys that, you would let him play through mistakes because that's his game. But now, he's just in a fight for maybe a third pair spot. He became an extra defenseman during the return to play tournament for the most part. Played some games, but for the most part, he was their 7th guy. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, it's tough to play with confidence when you're looking to play your best game every single time you're out there because you're just trying to stay in the lineup.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's in an interesting spot. And to me, if anything, the Flyers, if you look in terms of value, Eric Gustafsson or Shane Gostisbehere, there's probably a little bit more value. The Flyers are probably tied a little bit more towards Shane Gostisbehere because he's under contract for the next 3 years.
Right.
And if anything, maybe you're looking to turn him into a trade chip. He is a trade chip. Let's be honest. He's a trade chip. And in order to make that chip look more enticing and more playable, that he has to play. He has to play and prove himself. Whereas Eric Gustafsson's on a 1-year deal. Maybe he's not as valuable to the organization. They're going to be about winning hockey games next year. Of course, it's always about that. Mm-hmm. But you have to look at big picture as well. And, yeah, I hope to see Shane Gostisbehere play. I think he needs to be out there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you did go out and make one off-season acquisition for the most part, other than the minor leaguer that they got. And that was Eric Gustafsson. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure you signed him for $3 million just to have him sit.
Right.
So it tells me that it's going to come down to Shane Gostisbehere and Robert Hagg again. And it's going to become between those two guys kind of duking it out for playing time.
Right.
It could be a game-by-game basis. Mm-hmm. It became the game-by-game basis for the most part of last season.
Hagg pretty much won that battle too.
And he did. And then Shane got hurt. And then he had the lingering effects after he came back for one game. And then it kind of made their decision easier. But for a while, it looked like it was going to be a really game-by-game fight between Philip Myers, Shane Gostisbehere, and Robert Hagg. They're bullish on Philip Myers. They really like his potential, and we know why. I think he's going to be almost a guarantee to be in that lineup. And it's really going to come down to Shane Gostisbehere and Robert Hagg to prove who deserves to be in there. It could be matchup-based. It could be performance-based. But it will be very interesting to see how it plays out. But I think they got Eric Gustafsson because they want to see what he can do offensively. Yeah. And to see what he can do offensively, you might have to have him in the top 4. But time will tell. Mm-hmm. As for the top pair, I could see it being Travis Sanheim, but my gut is leaning towards Philip Myers. He's a righty shot defenseman.
Right.
Sanheim's a lefty, so maybe that makes a little more sense with Provorov.
Mhm.
And I just think they're so high on him. I think they're
Right.
so high on him to say, hey, go
Yeah.
play with our best defenseman. Show us what you can do. He's going to be there with you. And let's see what you can do, and let's see if you can take on greater responsibility now that Matt Niskanen is gone.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think it might be hard to kind of put a rookie in that spot, because I feel like with Myers, and I don't really like doing this comparing Myers with Sanheim, because you really can't, because again, Sanheim has been in the league. This will be his 4th year in the league already. He was drafted. Myers was never drafted. So I feel like with Sanheim, if he makes a mistake at times, it's not as obvious, and like he's able to recover. But Myers, it is so glaring, and it is just really obvious that he makes a mistake at times. But there are times when he is unbelievable, and there are times when he just sometimes just does not look right. And it's nothing. It's not a fault of his own. It's just the way he's a young player. That's going to happen. And as we were talking about all that, I didn't even mention who I think could be the bottom pairing. I personally think Gustafsson is a 5 at best. I feel like defensively he's not great. I honestly think Ghost is better defensively, and I know not many people really talk about his defensive game. But overall, I think Gustafsson is going to be really good for the power play. I mean, we know how bad that power play was in the playoffs. It was just atrocious. I mean, really,
I think it was 4 for 52. Off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure it was 4 for 52, which
no matter what it was, it still was bad regardless. I feel like, I mean, I legitimately think that they are literally doing everything. I give Michel Therrien props, because if you look at their power play from when it was literally one of the best power plays in the league when they had Wayne Simmons in front, and guys like Scott Hartnell in the slot, and obviously they had Giroux and Voracek. I mean, they had Mark Streit as their power play quarterback for a while, and the power play was good. It wasn't terrible, but then for years it just looked like it was the same setup every time. And this year, what do? They put Giroux on the right side, and that kind of opened up a little bit for everybody else but Giroux. He had nothing. I mean, Giroux literally had either a really just not a great option for a shot or the pass down low. That's it. They scored sometimes on it if they would switch off the face-off or whatnot, but I feel like majority of it, they couldn't do much. And I think one of the biggest things they had the problem with this year with the power play, just for the playoffs, even though it's really so sample size, you can't necessarily judge much off of it. But it was the zone entry. I mean, the zone entry was terrible. I mean, it was just at times just too many passes. I feel like they spent more time in their own zone retrieving the puck than they were, past their own blue line. It struggled. I feel like their skating was off for a majority of it. And by the time they got up there, it was pretty much over. So I think the one thing that they really need to do power play wise, I really like the double screen in front. We saw that a lot for majority of the season. I feel like halfway through they kind of switched that up. They did score a handful of goals off that double deflection, and I think that they'll most likely use that again. It makes me think if they'll use 2 defensemen, which is why they have Gustafsson. I wonder if they could possibly do something where they have instead of maybe switch Gustafsson with Provorov, or maybe they put Voracek with Gustafsson. I don't know. I mean, there's a bunch of things they can do. It makes me think if they keep Giroux on that right side or if they keep him on the left. I'm not so sure. But, Jordan, what are your thoughts here, kind of last thoughts here on the power play?
Yeah, I think with Michel Therrien, the reason they had Giroux change from his normal side a few times was they really wanted to create multiple looks. They didn't want to be predictable, and I think that was the biggest thing. I felt like when Michel Therrien came in and Alain Vigneault, they probably thought the power play was predictable, not just because of the personnel, given that they've had some of these guys for a long time now on that same unit, but just the looks become predictable, and then all of a sudden the penalty kill has an easier job. So I think what the challenge was creating multiple looks, but the challenge to that sometimes is multiple looks can create maybe complications. Maybe all of a sudden there's inconsistencies.
Overthink.
Sometimes, what do they always say? Simple is better.
Right.
And I think there was a kind of a tug there of, do we want to really go hard on the multiple looks element, or do we want to just try to simplify it and do what we know works and play to these guys' strengths? I think there's pluses and there's pros and cons, I think, to both. But I think when you're really struggling, the easiest thing to do is just simplify.
Yeah.
But I like the multiple looks. I thought that worked well in the regular season. I thought we saw more.
Mm-hmm.
We saw more movement. We saw more creativity. It wasn't guys just being stationary. There was unpredictable movement, and it kind of had the penalty kill on its toes a lot because they're constantly trying to find the puck and also find a guy. I thought that was good. I thought it worked. It was just weird. Once they got into a funk in the playoffs, they just couldn't seem to get out of it to the point where, like you said, entries became kind of an ugly even became ugly. Something that's should be the first step is just simply entry, get the puck in the zone, get set up, and they seem to struggle with that almost where it became a mind game.
Yeah, because I feel like for majority of it, every time they had the power play in the zone, they lost the faceoff. I'm like, well, that's the power play because I knew that they wouldn't get in clean again because that's just how it was. And I feel like, I mean, obviously the playoffs is so sample size you can't really say much. I mean, Konechny didn't even score. Drew had 1 goal. I mean, Konechny was their only all-star, and he didn't even score in the playoffs. But for majority of it, it just seemed like every time they would lose the face-off, they couldn't get back in. It was just like whatever they had was just gone. It looked like it was there for the first maybe 4 games, and it was like maybe halfway there in Game 1 versus Montreal. But besides that, that was it. And then they kind of just like fell apart in like bits and pieces. And that's kind of just how I saw it. But Jordan, again, I really thank you for doing this. Just let everybody know where they can follow you on Twitter. If there's any links you want to give me for the description, and I will put all of that in the description below for you guys to check it out.
Chris, my pleasure coming on. Thank you for having me. I'm a huge fan of your YouTube channel. Keep up all the great work. I think fans seriously love the consistent content. You always bring that. So thank you for having me. And for those that need to find my work, you can follow me on Twitter at jhallmbcs, and you can find my work at NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. Chris, thanks again for having me.
Yeah, no problem, Jordan. Thank you again. And remember, guys, podcasts, articles, those links are on my channel. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'll see you guys in the next one, and goodbye.